Hi, Tom.
Hi, Jace. How you doing?
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, very well.
Good.
Another week's flown by.
It has.
Have you been busy?
Yeah, always. And yeah, great. And it's been a good week. And I'm looking out. And although we've had a bit of drizzle, we've got a bit of sunshine finally, haven't we? This last weekend.
Good. We've got the weather in. That's sorted.
Woohoo!
No need to worry about the weather now for the rest of the show. Right. Well,
Slightly different show from normal this week, Jace.
It is. It is. Yeah. 10x6 has become 10x4. Thanks to some extended interviews which we've done this week with some amazing guests. But we've got 3 interviews and one little time opportunity for us to chat later in the show, which is good, on a very important issue now that communities are opening up again. But the first section that we're going to look at this week is an interview with Councillor Alex Furman, who's from Weymouth Council, and he's the Labour member. And I caught up with him a couple of days ago to talk about his vision for Weymouth and Portland, or specifically for Weymouth, and how he would like to see things develop over the next 5 or 10 years. So here's Alex. Hi, Alex Furman. Welcome to 10x6.
Hello, Jace. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. Alex, from listeners and our readers, is Western East councillor, okay, and you're also chair of the working group. So you're focused very much in Weymouth, very much in Weston, and your focus is also very primarily on young people. So if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go on to a little bit more detail.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me. And I will note it is the mighty Western East, if you're going to get it right. But yeah, my name's Alex. I'm a primary school teacher. I teach around the corner. I live here in Western East. I've been a counsellor for, I guess, just over 2 years now. I've never done anything like this before. Primarily, my background within community engagement is working as part of the basketball club with Weymouth Basketball. That was not planned. But yeah, I developed a lot of the junior setup from the basketball club, from under 9s, 12s, 14s, 16s, and got into teaching, and kind of, sort of took on this role of, well, if you want the world to change, you've got to change it. There's no point banging on about it on Facebook. If you're serious about getting stuck in and complaining about, local politics, for example, get stuck in. And I thought, well, that little thing in my head thought, you always got to run for public office maybe once in your life. And I tried it, and by hook or crook, 21 votes, I beat the current leader of the opposition for DC Council. So
fantastic.
Yeah, I'm doing all right, thank you.
And the first 2 years then, since you were elected, has it fulfilled your expectations, or has it, been more challenging than you expected?
It's a massive learning curve. There's no such thing as training for being in local politics or local government. I think in terms of has it met my expectation, I'm going to say no, because I haven't done everything I want to do. And by the way, that list does grow every day, if not, by 2 or 3 things when I see them on the street or get an idea. But in terms of my own personal development, yeah, I think it's been great. I think everybody should try and go into local politics, just to appreciate what actually goes into sort of like the everyday life. Whether it's like your bins being taken out or an art project, there's so much that goes into it, and it really does take a lot of my time. But it's time that I love to spend doing it. Trying to think, I think when I first realised it, I was in council meeting, and the Rambling Association had sent in a brief to another councillor, and anybody sort of, I don't know, I suppose I'm not trying to slice off the Rambling Association and their followers, but it was, for me, it's not a particular interest, and maybe not for people of my generation or certainly my friendship groups. But when I was there, I kind of had this little sort of surreal moment where I came out of myself, and the councillor in question was going on about it, and I kind of just came to and thought, God, you know, this is really boring. And then this sort of like another wave came through, and I was like, but I really love it. Like, this is awesome. I'm like having an effect on my community, and as hard as I work is the effect that I can have. And it kind of, from then on, you know, that was only a couple of meetings in. From then on, I've just been like, well, nobody can say no to me. If I want to do something, it's on my own back, and it's through my own hard work. I mean, people have said no, and stuff does get caught out, but genuinely, you know, you get what you put into it, and it's been an extremely fulfilling and exciting and just engaging part of my life, and I love it.
Fantastic. And you're on the Services and the Human Resources Committee. Tell us a little bit about why that attracted you, those particular.
Yeah, sure. So services is everything the Weymouth Town Council delivers. I think there's two primary sort of important committees. That's finance and governance. You know, when you talk about the money and the way it's delivered, but the services is how it's delivered. It's getting into the brass tacks of, if you've got something that needs delivering, whether it be a service, an art project. I might mention that a bit later because I've got one coming up. But that's where you get stuff done. And as much as I appreciate the paperwork and things like that, I don't work on a process of tick this, write this, do that. I do it when I need to, but I'd rather get stuck in and kind of, you know, make sure that whatever needs doing is being done. Human resources, my background in teaching, I'm also, you know, a union member, I was a caseworker locally for the NEU, and I just had a background on that. So when the council came into being, we required lots of policy and human resource kind of expertise in that area. So I was really happy to lend my kind of professional background to that.
And you're chair of the youth working group. So what does that enable you to do, and how closely are you working with young people locally, and how proactive are they in coming forward with ideas, etc.?
Yeah, so I was asked to be the chairman of the youth working group. Unfortunately, this is all sort of pre-COVID that it all got put in place, and we had wonderful connections with Antonia from Participation People. We talked to DC about how we can engage young people in politics, or rather, not really politics. I mean, the process of local government. Really, that's what it's about. So what we got to was an experience day. COVID came along, knocked it all out. You know, nobody could do anything. I'm really happy that at this point now, we've got all of the contacts in school. We've got a brief for a day that we're going to do in July, hopefully, for young people in Weymouth. They're going to be contacted by contacts from the schools, because we want to develop a steering group. We want to know what young people want. I think when I was growing up, and I certainly don't, you know, dismiss the ambitions of current councillors or long-standing councillors, but I certainly didn't feel like I had a voice in Weymouth when I was growing up. Maybe I wasn't trying to, I don't know. But what my hope is that we can move away from 60-year-olds named David that are white blokes making all the decisions, and we can come to somewhere where young people have a platform on whatever level of government and service that is given to a community, and they can feel like they're empowered to say something and talk to us, and ultimately make decisions for themselves as well. You know, I want to make, through the youth group, a youth council. Now, it might be a panel, might be a forum, it's whatever the young people want, really. But we're going to do this steering group. We're going to find out from a select group where we should kind of head. And then after that, I'm really hoping that we can develop a town council for young people. And when we have those big meetings, one of the main things, the things that we can never ignore, is what does our youth town council, what do they think? What input do they want? Do they see this as something for the long term, or is it something they're really not interested in? Because we can only make the best decisions based on our experiences. And now, if our experiences are predominantly retired white males, we're not going to be inclusive. And that's not to say, and I think, you know, that town councillors don't do their best to represent young people, but I don't think they do. And that's why I stood for what, you know, on my campaign, and to stand up for not just people of Western East, but for every young person in Weymouth, to know that actually, you know, like, Berman's there, and if you've got something to tell him and you want to speak some truth to power, I'll help you do that. And yeah, I just think, you know, we're going to do this day in July. We're going to get the wheels turning. We're going to get it rolling, and hopefully we're going to have something that, you know, the whole town can be proud of, and everybody can feel, you know, that they're invested in.
Fantastic, fantastic. And that leads us into sort of the main question I want to finish off with is, what do you see, you know, the future for Weymouth being? Obviously very much driven now by the youth voice and the youth imagination, but sort of more generally as well, encompassing obviously young people. You know, what would your vision be like for Weymouth in 5, 10, 15 years? Because you know, obviously the slogan that you've satirically adopted, "Make Weymouth Great Again." So what would it be to make it look great?
Yeah, and I think, you know, very much tongue in cheek on that, "Make Weymouth Great Again." I think, you know, it's subjective, of course, but I think to be great, it invokes a feeling. It invokes something about your comfortability within your community, and I think that's where I come from. Though I pinched it off of the Orange Man, you know, it was meant to very much be in line with the fact that, you know, it's not about fairy lights and harbour railings and things like that. It's a holistic view that, you know, that where you come from you should get a great feeling from that. I mean, I certainly do from the town, and I want people to kind of invest in their community. But to answer your question, what, you know, 5-10 years time, I think we need to have a place, and there'll be loads of documents that say, "Oh, great place to do," and that's great if you're ticking a box, and that's fantastic if you want a brand logo. But you really do have to just get down to brass tacks. We need to have a town that doesn't cater for a particular brand of demographic, whether it be a tourist or a retired person or a working class person or university educated. We need everything, and I think it has to start though. And I'm sorry, it will be you. We just need to have somewhere where young people feel that there's a platform for them to fulfill their dreams. You know, if you're a young entrepreneur, we should have business opportunities and support networks for those to happen. If you are if you're a graduate, we should have an infrastructure or facilities where, you know, graphic designers, filmmakers, we should have industries that that kind of aim to attract these kind of professionals. If you want to be a plumber, then you know, we should be able to have those things. I know for many things there is, but until we're really inclusive, until we've really got something that can cater for everyone, maybe we can't do it. But, you know, we don't make, you know, good the enemy of perfect, or however way you say it. But, you know, we could do something that just brings we could just do something that brings forward, you know, a feeling of greatness and a feeling investment from people. That's what I want to do, and to get people off of Facebook from just having a reason to complain about something. A lot of the time, it's knowing that, you know, if something's broken, something needs fixing, it can get fixed. If something can be better, we can find a way of making it better, you know, within the community. I know it's all very like positive. Maybe people will be going, "Oh, you know, you can't think that. What about this? What about that?" I just think, you know, if you don't try, you'll never achieve it. You know, in basketball, we say you miss every shot you don't take. Well, you know, we miss every opportunity we don't try and make for ourselves in this town. So I'd love us, you know, to get on that footing.
No, and I entirely agree with you. It's so difficult to come up with an idea these days without somebody wanting to come and put their size 10s all over it and squeeze it into the ground. And we need to be sort of, you know, taking your vision, I think, and what we need to do is get as many people on board as possible, and then they need to come together, unite, in order to make as much of it work as they possibly can. Because otherwise, you're absolutely right. We sit on social media, we pick things apart, nothing ever gets done, and then we just continue the cycle of moaning and whinging. So Yeah, no, it's great. No, thank you very much, Alex, for coming on 10 by 6 today, and you will be on hopefully a whole number of times in the future as well to take us through how it's progressing, and anything else, obviously, that you think the community needs to know about. So thank you so much for coming on board.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jason. If anybody needs to get hold of me, I'm always on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. It's at Councillor Thurman, CLLRFUHRMANN. Hit me up, ideas, anything you've got, please. I'm always here.
Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care, Alex.
Thank you.
That was amazing. Talking to Alex, one thing that really struck me, Tom, was his inspirational approach to how we can empower young people. And the whole idea for me of having a youth council in which major decisions that are being made by the primary council, whatever you want to call them, can also be run by young people, and young people can give their feedback and discuss how they perceive policies, because at the end of the day, they are the future. And his point, you know, that having, he didn't actually say these words, but having sort of crusty white middle-class men making decisions for us, and us just having to like it or lump it. Well, actually, let's get young people involved and let them have their feedback. And if they say no, then they should be listened to.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Alex, and he's you know, a bundle of energy, and you know, fabulous to have him as a local councillor. You know, full of ideas, full of bounce and energy, and also a man of action, you know, who actually gets things done. So yeah, he's proving to be a terrific local councillor. And yeah, you know, and absolutely great to hear his vision and the work he's doing to initiate a sort of youth council, or you know, young people's voice being actively involved with the decision-making processes of the town council. I was involved with an initial what used to be Weymouth and Portland Borough Council Youth Council, probably the best part of 20 years ago, and it ran for about 4 years and was very successful. Really active youth council, engaging young people in decisions about the council processes and services. But also they ran their own events and projects and made film projects to try and influence decision makers in different areas. And it was really good. Sadly, it sort of, the council decided not to run it anymore back, I don't know, 15 years ago or so. So, you know, great that Alex is resurrecting that. And it's so important that young people have a say in local services and how we develop our communities.
Definitely. And one of the things, obviously, that young people specifically are extremely interested in is climate change. And you had an opportunity this week to interview Calvin Clayton, who is a councillor from Bridport.
That's right, yeah. So Calvin Clayton is a Dorset councillor from Bridport, and I was very fortunate to interview him earlier this week on the topic of the climate emergency and how the council have done over the last couple of years, and how they hopefully will do going forward in tackling the climate emergency. So here's the interview with Calvin. Hi, I'd like to welcome you. This is Calvin Clayton, everybody. Welcome, Calvin. Hi.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. So thank you for joining us here at 10 by 6. For the viewers, Calvin is a Dorset councillor based in Bridport, and he's also the lead member for the Green Party on the issue of climate change. So we're here today to have a discussion about climate change and about the council's actions and response to the issue, particularly over the last couple of years and looking forward. So real pleasure to have you here, Calvin.
Thank you.
I'm going to start by asking you about what the council has achieved over the last couple of years. As I'm sure you're aware, having declared a climate emergency 2 years ago, there have recently been criticisms of Dorset Council for perhaps not having
taken enough measures, enough steps with enough sort of speed and significance to make much of a difference. There's been protests about that recently. So I just wanted to ask you your opinion. Perhaps you can share with the viewers your thoughts on that, where you think the council has made progress and perhaps where it could do more.
I think first to say, I certainly share that sense of frustration that it's all taking so long. And I think I would like to preface any comments I make by pointing out, first of all, anything I say is not a criticism of any of the officers from Dorset Council who've worked on this strategy and action plan. And far from it, actually. I'm full of the praise for the work they've done. And it shouldn't be read as a criticism of Ray Bryan, the portfolio holder. Not him personally, at least. And he's been very successful in bringing quite a great deal of money towards the council from central government. But nevertheless, I think the time it has taken to finalise the strategy and action plan is evidence of a general lack of urgency. The IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, warned a couple of years ago that we've got 10 years to make significant changes. 10 years. We've lost 2 of them already, and I don't see any significant changes being made. So that is a cause of concern.
Right. I hear you. Yeah, I mean that should be of concern to all our viewers, obviously. So what do you think has been achieved? Looking at the positive side of the last couple of years, what kind of progress do you think has been made?
This is where I feel frustrated, because I think I'm going to there's a great deal that's been put into the strategy and it's gone to public consultation. Now I've got mixed views over the consultation. Dorset Council do them on most major changes. It's great. It's really good to give all residents and stakeholders an opportunity to give their thoughts and ideas. And we really should listen to people. But I don't think the majority of people fully understand the seriousness of the situation. And on that, I would like to see Dorset Council taking much more of a political lead on this. And I think it's incumbent upon them to take a political lead. I suppose overall, my own feeling is the strategy and action plan displays a general lack of ambition. It needs a sense of mission. That's how I see it, and I just don't see it coming at the moment.
Right. Interesting you say about, perhaps some of the population are not fully aware of the seriousness or, the major concerns that are held within the scientific community about potential consequences or very likely consequences of the climate crisis. Do you think the council, I don't know, did the council in their consultation attempt to educate people around facts and the science before asking them their opinion, or was it just opinion based on their existing knowledge?
Fix one of them, it asked people to what extent they prioritised the climate emergency, and people didn't put it as their number one. And quite understandably, things to do with social care and transport have more of a day-to-day impact. I think it was the sociologist Anthony Giddens who talked about one of the internal problems of climate change, in as much as people won't be ready to change until the effects are in their face. But by the time the effects are in their face, it's going to be too late to do anything about it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that is one of the problems where you need political lead to argue that point and persuade people. And dare one say, start enforcing certain cultural changes, how we live, how we shop, how we do business. Otherwise, when we're forced to do it, it's going to be really uncomfortable.
Yeah. I agree with you, and there's a concern that, like you say, people will only be on board with taking action once it's possibly once it's too late and it's affecting people right across the world. I have a kind of view. I keep saying that I have faith in our young people to change the world for the better. We're currently on a path that's focused very much on greed and this huge divide now between rich and poor and exploitation of the world's resources. And I like to think that young people will say, no, we're not doing that anymore. And I keep saying I have faith in our young people to across the world to stand up and say we're not doing that anymore. We're not destroying the planet based on greed, a system of greed. But I just hope they do that in time. I hope they do it. They come to that realization and make that change before it's too late in terms of climate change.
Yeah, I mean, certainly young people are not the problem. They're well on board and they understand. It's the older generation, my generation, dare I say your generation, and politicians of the same generation. Yeah, and I don't quite know how we're going to bring about those changes. But anyway.
Yeah. We're doing a pretty awful job of running the world and our societies, aren't we, our generation? But hopefully the next generations will make vast improvements. So, I mean, are there things that you're proud of in terms of what the council has achieved? I know it's been, you're clearly saying that there's been some frustrations. It's not been quick enough, urgent enough, seen as a priority perhaps, but and sometimes some things take time, don't they, to put into place. But what do you think you're proud of that has been achieved?
This is going to sound negative, and I really do not want to sound negative. But I don't think, other than declaring a climate emergency, nothing has actually been achieved yet. There's a lot of possibilities in the pipeline, but I think what's missing, in my opinion, is that Dorset Council, that is, should be setting out a vision of what they think Dorset life would be like in 2030, 2040, 2050. And bearing in mind that, in my opinion, that the climate ecological emergency is what I call a wicked problem. It's a problem where we haven't got absolute solutions for yet. It's more than just a technical problem requiring a technical solution. It's complex. There's large numbers of interrelated dynamic systems. It's non-linear. Small variables can bring about huge changes. There's a huge degree of uncertainty in this. But nevertheless, I think we should have a vision of what we would like Dorset life to be like 20, 30, 40 years' time. It's not going to be possible for Dorset Council to come up with a plan of how we're going to do this, but they need to be pushing, working with stakeholders to come out with imaginative solutions. And just to give some examples of what I would like to see, Dorset should be self-sufficient in renewable energy. That should be our aim. And the easiest way to do that is for an offshore wind farm. Now, I know that Ray Bryan, the portfolio holder, is very sympathetic to this, but we need to be pushing it. We need to be pushing government. We need to be pushing a whole load of arguing with all those objectors that are going to come on board as soon as we start trying to do a Navitas Bay, another one, and say, look, we need this. That is the bottom line. Just a couple more examples. Sorry, I get carried away on this.
No, I mean, tangible examples are great, Kelvin. I think really good to hear some tangible.
We should have an aim that all current buildings, including listed buildings, should be retrofitted to the highest energy efficiency standards possible. And I know it's not possible at the moment, but we should be demanding government brings about building regs that require all new buildings to be constructed to these standards in the first place. That's what we should be aiming for. And a particular example, which I have suggested to Dorset Council, it's not going very far at the moment, the Town and Country Planning Association come up with various models of how you could do transport to solve the climate problem. And the model that would work best for Dorset is what they call a network of eco-towns. It's a range of market towns connected by a really good public transport system. But within the towns, it's so constructed and developed that people are encouraged to work from home, active travel within the towns, active travel, that's walking, cycling between towns and the outlying villages, encouraging local food production. So they're really quite self-sufficient towns. But that needs planning at a rather large scale. Like I say, these outcomes are beyond Dorset Council's power to achieve on their own, but they're necessary. So they should be working with stakeholder groups to find ways, to create ways of achieving them.
Absolutely. And I mean, thanks for those examples. They were great examples. And as you're talking, you do start to imagine a slightly different and a better world that we could inhabit, that obviously causes less destruction to the planet. So it's essential we move in that direction. There were some nice concrete examples there. And sometimes people think, you know, when you talked about retrofitting and, you know, things like insulation, providing insulation to every home, every property, people think, well, the mass cost of that. But actually, our government is giving vast sums of money in subsidies to the fossil fuel companies year on year. If that money was diverted into insulating homes better across the country, it would be better for the planet and save us all a lot of utility bills going forward, wouldn't it?
Yes, but it's not just, I mean, legislation is a big part of that. And I do feel sorry for Dorset Council in as much as their hands are tied a great deal by national legislation. I fully accept that. But it's not all about legislation. It's also about how you interpret that legislation. And I sit on area planning. And it's really frustrating where a listed building puts in an application for double glazing or have solar panels in the roof, and they're rejected because they don't look nice in a conservation area.
Yeah.
We need to get over this. We really do. That's what I mean. That doesn't require a huge amount of change, monetary change. That just requires a will and perhaps the willingness to fight. Yeah.
Yeah, we have to fight for a better world for our children, for our grandchildren. You know, we have to make these changes. So I suppose that you've outlined some lovely concrete examples of where you'd like to see things moving. And perhaps we could finish by you just talking to us about why you think this is so important. I mean, obviously, a lot of people are now have better knowledge than we used to about the effects of the climate crisis and how dangerous that is to us. What are your thoughts? I mean, how important is this as an issue? Is it a side issue, or is it a major issue that everyone should be serious about?
Without sounding over dramatic, I think potentially it's an existential issue. You know, the existence, the future well-being of humanity is at stake here, and it's a global issue. The trouble with the complexity in climate change is that there are absolutely no certainties. So a person denying the problem, and there are people out there, could well say, well, it's a bit of a problem, but it's going to be nowhere near as bad as you say. It could all turn out okay. And it could. There are absolutely no certainties in this. But all the scientific evidence, or at least predicts something like 90% chance of sea level rise of 1 metre by the end of the century, if not before. But it's the tipping points with the melting ice caps, the Gulf Stream drift, or, you know, the Gulf Stream, which brings us our climate, could stop. And there will be a drastic change to our climate. We will become a continental climate. We'll have severely cold winters and boiling hot summers. And that could be a tipping point at any time.
Yeah. And a metre of rising sea levels, I mean, globally could cause massive problems for coastal regions and indeed whole countries. I think in Bangladesh,
there are a large number of people who are very much against migrants coming to this country, escaping war, famine. Imagine what it's going to be like when, I can't remember the exact figure, but something like 4/5 of Bangladesh is underwater.
Yeah.
Where are those people going to come?
Yeah, you're
You
talking
can't
about
just
tens
turn
of
forward
millions.
and say it's not our problem.
Yeah.
It is our problem because we're one of the drivers of the Industrial Revolution,
Yeah.
which has brought it all about. We can't ignore it.
So globally, I mean, we are in danger of forcing tens of millions of people, maybe even hundreds of millions of people into being refugees, making their lands, their whole countries uninhabitable. On a local level, you know, a metre of sea level rise potentially. I mean, we're a coastal county, very proud of our beautiful coast. Do you think there are serious dangers in terms of housing, population, residential areas close to the sea?
Well, yes. You know,
Yeah.
and it's not just the mean sea level rise. It's also the storm surges associated with winter storms. So if you've got a metre sea level rise and then a severe storm on top of that,
Yeah.
there's going to be severe flooding.
Yeah. Flooding is obviously going to be a huge issue for us here in Britain going forward as climate change becomes worse, and it's something we're already seeing. And of course, we're already seeing, here in Britain, particularly with flooding and other issues, but also across the world, we're already seeing climate change, the effects, you know, in terms of more extreme weather events, you know, and that can be really cold weather events as well as boiling hot, you know. Almost every year having increasing climate temperatures, global temperatures per year, but and droughts and forest fires. So yeah, so it's a very serious issue. I'm sure almost all of our new viewers are on board with that, and I'm sure all our viewers would wish you and your fellow councillors of all parties well at going forward and in trying to implement measures to do our best to tackle it and to change our society. And the services provided by the council in such a way that that we're good to the planet going forward. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Kelvin. Thanks a lot for joining us. And
thank you. I'm sorry I can't be more optimistic, but
well, we'll just have to keep fingers crossed. And any young people listening, get involved. Stand to be a councillor if it's something you're passionate about. Maybe think about standing to be a councillor, and you can be the change.
Please do.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Kelvin.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, and we'll probably speak to you again. Thank you.
Well, that was great, and you know, a very honest, really, appraisal of how the council have acted. Obviously, we all wish things would happen much quicker, and hopefully, with Kelvin and other councillors from all parties working on it, hopefully we'll start to see more direct action taken toward, you know, towards making our county far greener and better for the planet going forward, and seeing council services improve in that way. So great to have the chance to speak to Kelvin, and over to you, Jace, then for our next interview.
Yes, and this is a double interview, I guess you can call it, in terms of there's been a feature-length interview with Clive Stafford-Smith, who we had on the show a couple of weeks ago, and as promised, he's back. And he's talking about his experiences at Guantanamo Bay. And I know you've already seen the clip, Tom, but absolute must watch if anybody is interested in international politics, geopolitics, human rights, law and order, justice, etc. Then this is an absolute must watch. So here is our extended version, if you like, extended interview with Clive Stafford-Smith. Hi, Clive.
It's
How are
an
you?
American saying this meeting's being recorded. Gosh.
Yeah, of course the viewers and the readers can't they can't hear that bit. Only us two can hear that bit, which is cool. Yeah. Well, welcome back, Clive Stafford-Smith, back to 10 by 6, and he was on the show a couple of weeks ago. And this week we're focusing very much primarily on your experiences at Guantanamo Bay as a human rights lawyer in terms of working with detainees.
You mean it's not about my favorite Caribbean resort?
That's for a later edition. Clive wrote a book, so correct me, Clive, it's about 2007.
Yeah, around then.
Yeah. Bad Men, Guantanamo Bay and the Secret Prisons, and which you detailed, obviously we're going back 15 years, and this is in the era of George Bush and Condoleezza Rice, etc. But you detailed your experiences of going into Guantanamo and some of the cases and a lot of the sort of the politics around it, especially in terms of the American perspective. So I'm just going to do a very, very brief introduction, if that's all right for the readers and the viewers. And let's hope that it serves the function. Right. Okay. Basically, we're talking about Guantanamo Bay. So we're talking about the whole essence of rendition and taking people from who haven't gone through a court process. We're taking people from their countries and taking them to a specific camp, American camp on the coast of Cuba. So what I'm going to do is just read out a couple of references, issues that people have commented since. Guantanamo Bay is a dastardly place devoid of moral prowess and is probably the best recruitment tool that extremist groups such as Al-Qaeda have. This much we know, but it is only because of the sterling work of people like Clive Stafford Smith that we know anything. For years, he and many others like him, lawyers battling for global human rights at Reprieve and similar organizations, had lifted the lid on the abusive regime at Guantanamo Bay, a regime that has become almost a parody of itself over the years, a shameful blemish on the democratic idealism of the United States. And that was from a guy called Mark Hebden. And then this is a quote from yourself, Clive, when you were interviewed by Jon Snow on Channel 4 News in 2009. And Clive said about the treatment of detainees, "I would go one step further, that talk to decisions that were being made by the White House, by the National Security Council, Dick Cheney and Condoleezza Rice." He asserted that although the British had not carried out the torture, they were complicit in it. So this will enable us also not just to talk about the US, Clive, but also the role of the UK. Clive concluded that in trying to keep the torture allegations secret, the US authorities were confusing national security with national embarrassment. So does that still, do you still perceive it in that way 12 years on?
Well, it's actually worse, if anything. Back in the day when I first wrote that book, it was called Bad Men because everyone was meant to be a bad dude. My clients were the worst of the worst. We lawyers were referred to as the enemy. And then naturally, we lawyers and perhaps our clients thought of George Bush and the others as the bad men too. So we were all bad dudes. And this whole concept, there was an intelligence officer in Guantanamo who said in 2004 that for each of the 780 prisoners we were holding there, we had probably inspired 10 people around the world to hate us and to want to blow us up, and that would be 7,800. I think whoever that was would change his opinion now and say 1,000 for each of the prisoners there, because as we have purported to battle for human rights as Americans, and I'm American, and we behaved in such an immensely hypocritical way, what we've really done is inspire people to despise us. And that's a real shame, but it's got worse rather than better.
And you've pointed this out, Clive, on a whole number of occasions over the last 2 decades. Why is it you believe that they just don't learn their lessons? Why do these politicians...
I mean, come on, honestly, do you really, really think politicians are sitting around saying, "Oh, Clive tells me that's wrong.
No.
We should not do it"?
No, I understand that, but you've written books, you're a commentator, you're not a singular commentator. Many people said the same thing as you. So the fact that they don't care, and yet they tell us through lip service that they do, and it's about taking democracy to every nation on the planet, when in fact it seems to be almost the opposite. It seems to be just led by a corporate vision to control.
this is not anything that's unique. For the first 20 years of my work in America, it was all about the death penalty. And when you're sitting in America and you're looking at the problems we have, you know, we have a dreadful crime problem, a dreadful drug problem, a dreadful problem with, you know, lack of healthcare system, lack of welfare, all of these things. And if you're a politician, you can do one of two things. You can do something really sensible, which is, you know, probably ban guns, you legalize a bunch of the drugs, you create an education system, you create a welfare system, and it takes quite a long time. Or you can do something really stupid, which is just lying to the people. And so you say, oh, well, you know, if we execute a few African Americans, that'll solve the problem. And that was the whole populist nonsense. I believe the legal term is bullshit behind the death penalty. And the same's true of Guantanamo Bay. You know, if we want to do something serious about the underlying causes of extremism, what we don't do is set up a law-free place that, as just behind your shoulder, says honor bound to defend freedom. And then we refuse everyone freedom. And, you know, that just reminds everyone of Arbeit macht frei, and doesn't make us look good. So these are stupid decisions, but they're decisions being made by politicians who really are not interested in solutions. They're interested in re-election.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. So how did you personally get to be involved with Guantanamo?
Well, I woke up on the day of 9/11, and it was weird, you know, and I think most people, like the death of President Kennedy, know where they were when 9/11 happened. But, you know, I came from a European background where we were used to having dreadful wars and all sorts of awful things like that. America wasn't. You can name all the times that continental America has been invaded. You can tell me the precise date. You know, Pearl Harbor wasn't even the continent. It was Hawaii. We burned the White House down. The British did in 1812. It just hasn't happened in America. So the response was incredibly stupid. And it was exactly what they'd done in America to the Japanese Americans in World War II, which is lock everyone up in sight. And to me, that was just so self-evidently foolish that that's what I wanted to put a stop to. And I thought all of my fellow lawyers would love this. You know, what's better than suing George Bush? But actually, it was surprisingly difficult to get people to do it. America was very raw. And I think I underestimated how raw it was. And in the end, it was just me and a couple of my mates. And we brought the case of Rasul versus Bush on February the 19th, 2002, right after Guantanamo Bay was opened, because it seemed obvious to us that this was going to cause a lot of trouble. But it took quite a long time, 2.5 years of suing and losing, and a number of death threats from friendly people who thought we should just kill all Muslims, until we finally got to the Supreme Court and got them to open a little bit up. Not a lot. I mean, it was all very secretive, but at least then in 2004, I was able to go down and visit prisoners.
So 2004, you were able to visit the prisoners for the first time. What was your initial experience? What was your initial perceptions?
Well, I honestly thought that when Donald Rumsfeld said that all of these people were captured on the battlefield of Afghanistan, yeah, he would get it wrong somewhat, because Rumsfeld always did. But I thought that the vast majority of people in Guantanamo would indeed be people who had been fighting on the battlefield of Afghanistan. Whether that's any of our business as Americans is an interesting question, but, you know, they'd be prisoners of war. I got down there and I had a devil of a time finding an honest to goodness terrorist of any sort. And it took me a while to work out why. And when I did work out why, it was actually blindingly obvious. We as Americans were dropping leaflets, and I've got some of these things. We were dropping them all over Pakistan and Afghanistan, promising bounties for any evil bearded Muslim. I think we could probably count you in with that beard. We could, take you down. But we were offering a minimum of $5,000, going up to $20 million. And even $5,000 in a very poor country like that would equate, for where you are, to about $250,000. So this is my question to you. I'm offering you $250,000 just to snitch on me and say that I was in Tora Bora in October 2001. Are you going to do it?
Personally, I'm not, but then I'm
yes,
not
you are. You'd do me for 50 quid, wouldn't you?
I'm not in the situation, obviously, like they are, where my morality and my values are being impinged by what's going on around me in that sense. But it does seem
but
an
also,
awful.
Come on, that'd be $250,000, and you'd assume that I could prove I wasn't there. So it's money for nothing, right? You could just give me you'd take your $250,000, you'd rat me out, and then you'd take your money off into the sunset. Most people would do that, I think, and certainly it happened. And according to Pervez Musharraf, the former strongman of Pakistan, he wrote a pretty awful autobiography called In the Line of Fire. And he boasted that fully half of the prisoners in Guantanamo had been sold for bounties to the US by the Pakistanis. So they weren't even in Afghanistan. And the overwhelming majority of my clients over the years have been in that group, a group of people who were just sold for money and had precious little to do with anything.
So having offered 250,000, which is a lot of money per individual on this bounty who was caught, what was then the desire by the American authorities to take somebody who hadn't been on the battlefields of Afghanistan and put them in a prison camp thousands of miles away?
Well, let me give you an example that's still going on, because the sad truth is, right, we've liberated 740 of the 780 prisoners. Brilliant. Which is great. That's 94% of them. And I'm really pleased with that. But you would think by now that the remaining 40 really would be distilled down to the very worst of the worst people. And it's just not true. So I'll tell you the story of Ahmed Rabbani, who's one of my 7 remaining clients there in Gitmo. And Ahmed was sold for a bounty with a story saying that he was a wicked terrorist called Hassan Gul. And Ahmed was in Karachi, right, which I've looked it up. It is 1,000 kilometers from Afghanistan. But the US thought that they'd just captured Hassan Gul. And so they thought, we want to get information out of him. So they took Ahmed to Afghanistan, which is how Ahmed ended up in Afghanistan. And they took him to the dark prison and they tortured him there for 540 days. And they hung him up by his wrists in what the Spanish Inquisition used to call stripado, where slowly your shoulders dislocate. And they left him there for a week, and it was excruciatingly painful. And Ahmed would tell him anything. But the one thing he did consistently say is, no, I'm not Hassan Gul, I'm Ahmed Rabbani. Well, the Americans just didn't believe him. And gradually, they tortured him into saying all sorts of things that made him sound like a bad dude. And so at that point, they weren't going to let him go. And then what should happen? And we didn't find this out until 2014, when the US Senate did a report on it. I met Ahmed in Guantanamo in 2006. And then in 2014, after he'd told me his whole story, the Senate revealed that the US captured Hassan Gul, and they brought him to the same prison as Ahmed, right? The dark prison. But Hassan Gul was cooperating, by which I assume they mean he admitted he was Hassan Gul. So they let him go and they sent him back to Pakistan, the real Hassan Gul, where he went back to his wicked ways and was killed in a drone strike in 2012. Ahmed Rabbani, in the meantime, was Exhibit A for national embarrassment, that we had taken this guy who was a taxi driver in Karachi, tortured him for years into saying all these things. And now if we let him go, we're really going to look bad and we're going to get sued uphill and down dale. And so Ahmed Rabbani is still in Guantanamo Bay. And, you know, the human elements of this are so shocking. Ahmed, he just got married and his wife was pregnant, unbeknownst to him, at the time he was kidnapped. And his son Jawad was born several months later. And Jawad is now almost 18 years old. I've met Jawad. Ahmed's never met his own son. His own son has never met his dad. And, you know, these are things I think people tend to forget when it comes to abusing someone like Ahmed, is the collateral damage, if you will, to all these utterly innocent people as well, including his family. And that's just one of 100 stories I could tell you. I've represented at least 87 prisoners there. And there are just so many stories like that.
Thank you, Clive. I mean, I read the book, and that
what are you saying thank you for? Just in case you feel like you'd like to go for a little torture in the dark prison too.
No. Thank you for the narrative, because I was about to come on. When I read the book, and I've read other people's reviews of the book as well. It's not a page turner. It's not a book with a happy ending. Do you see what I mean? And for most people, they pick up a book to escape, but with Guantanamo, it's like you read a chapter and then you put it down, and then you don't think, okay, well, I can't wait to get back to that. But you come back to it purely because you want to find out what's really going on in the world, which, you know, unfortunately so few people do.
But I think there are one of the things I tried to write about in that book is that there's so many funny things that happen at Guantanamo. You know, it's an irony-free zone because the US has tried to lie so much, you know, because if you're going to try and justify the unjustifiable, you've really got to fib a lot. So, for example, just to give one of many, no, I'll give you two. The first is we don't do solitary confinement, right? We don't put you as a prisoner in solitary confinement because those do-good lawyers might say that's torture. So we actually do, but we just don't call it that. We call it a single cell operation. And that way, if you're a journalist and you ask me as a soldier, you know, do you have solitary confinement? I can look you in the eye and say, no, we don't have solitary confinement, because they just come up with new words for everything. And then the censorship is incredible. Everything that my clients say to me is classified. And if I tell you what they say without it being declassified, I'd have to kill you. I'm sorry. I'm only joking. I'm really not going to kill you. I'd just torture you. So when I first went there, I talked to Mozambique, who was one of the British guys there. And I wrote 30 pages of how he had been tortured and how he had witnessed a murder in Bagram Air Force Base, a prison there, and all the rest of it. And every single word was censored. And I, you know, what I have to do is talk to the sort of CIA person who's the censor person in Washington. And I asked him, I said, you know, what on earth is this about? You can't censor this. This is how my client was tortured. And he looks at me and he says, oh, well, that's the methods and means of interrogation. And I say, you can't be telling me that murdering people is a method and means of interrogation. And he said, yeah, it is. It intimidates the prisoner into telling you more. And this was the mad stuff. I eventually got that stuff declassified, which is why I can tell you about it now. But it took an enormous amount of time. And the things they censor, I had a little fun time getting them to censor books, because I'd try to take books into my client and they would randomly censor stupid things. And so I just started having a little fun. And I took in Jack and the Beanstalk, and they censored that because if my prisoners get their hands on a magic bean, you know, they can probably escape. And they censored, I took to taking books in by famous authors who I'd got to sign them to my clients. And so John Grisham kindly signed a copy of The Innocent Man. And obviously they censored that because it talks about innocent people. And so then he wrote a long piece in the New York Times about it. And it's just totally mad. Everything about Guantanamo is deranged.
And from your perspective, then, I mean, what we'll go on to the highs in a minute in terms of getting them off and how that makes you feel, as well as obviously how it makes them and their families feel. But what are the ultimate lows that you've experienced, and how do you, when you leave Guantanamo and you come back to base, what sort of coping mechanisms do you have?
Well, the ultimate low, the most difficult thing, to be honest, is knowing the truth, but being sworn, and I have to obey the rules, otherwise I can't keep on doing it, even though I think the rules are stupid. So I knew all the stuff about torture and about the rubbish that passes for facts, and I can't tell anyone. It's just so frustrating. And so that's one. The other that has really, really been difficult is when I first met, for example, Binyam Mohammed, who is another of the British guys. Binyam had been rendered to Morocco by the US. And it was because he asserted his rights. He said, I'm not talking to you, I'll talk to the British if they want to. He was detained in Pakistan as well. But the Americans, because he wouldn't answer, assumed he was covering something up. So they took him to Morocco, where the Moroccans took a razor blade to his genitals every other week for a year and a half. And that wasn't the worst of it. Binyam was then taken to the dark prison where Ahmed had been and subjected to the psychological torture. And I spent 3 days with Binyam when I was first there with him, just writing down everything he had to tell me. And I remember him looking at me and saying, Clive, you're going to have to put in the emotion because I'm just kind of dead in the head. And, you know, I'm writing this stuff down. And I'm feeling like I'm getting post-traumatic stress disorder. And you can just imagine what poor Binyam's going through. And here he is, sitting across the table from an American lawyer. The Americans are the people who have tortured him. He's stuck in this place. They then wanted to execute him. They wanted to give him the death penalty for the stuff he had said under torture, all of which was nonsense. And being in that position and being able to do absolutely nothing for him, really, right then and there. I got him out eventually, but it was a lot of work. But for someone who has suffered like that in such a barbaric way, to have to then walk out of the door and leave him there, that was really, really difficult. But of course, you always have to remember, it's much more difficult for him.
So just taking on that point a bit further then. So when you leave him and you come home to England, to Dorset, I mean, and you go to sleep at night or whatever, have you found that you've changed any behavior types in order to cope, or have you or you've got inbuilt?
Well, actually, you know, it's one of those interesting things that only I learned through therapy. I was sent away to a boarding school when I was very young. And that has the effect, although I don't think those of us who went through it necessarily recognize this. Certainly our current Prime Minister doesn't recognize it. It has the effect of several different things, but one of which is it allows you to dissociate, because, you know, your mum and dad are telling you that emotion and love is all about being sent away to school, and you thought it was about your teddy bears. And so you learn as a very young child to dissociate from those sorts of painful experiences. And I didn't know this, but I did this. This is what allowed me to go and witness my clients' executions. I always thought that people were a bit weak when they couldn't do that. But actually, I discovered later in life that I'm the weird one. And this, you know, it's not something I recommend. I think it's child abuse to send your children away like that. But it's been really helpful to me that I've been able to totally dissociate from the incredibly painful experiences of watching people die in front of me. And I'm grateful to that, because otherwise I don't know how you'd do it, really.
Thank you for being so candid. So taking it the other extreme now then, so what are the real positives that you can identify and share?
Well, the real positives are enormous. I mean, I always think, you know, people sometimes talk about us do-gooders, and let me plead guilty to being a do-gooder. It's better than being a do-badder.
Yeah.
You know, why do you do that? I can't imagine doing anything else. I can't imagine going to work every day as a corporate lawyer representing some pointless corporation. Whereas when you're able to go to a place like Guantanamo, and I've so enjoyed recently with Ahmed Rabbani, who's going through a really tough time in Gitmo. He's been on a hunger strike now since 2013, so 8 years. They've force-fed him up the nose. And if you want to see how that is, Mos Def, the rap star, was really kind and allowed us to force feed him. It's on YouTube. And it's really horrible, painful thing he goes through. And Ahmed is a chef, and he doesn't eat, and he cooks when he can for the other prisoners. And, you know, it's just been great to be able to work with him and help him. He wants to publish a cookbook, so I'm helping him publish his cookbook. And obviously it's much better when you get him out and get someone home. And I love, you know, to go visit my clients. One of my guys got out and went back to Morocco, and, you know, we sued the British government for their complicity in his torture, and he got some compensation. So he was able to set up a restaurant. And to see people rebuild their lives and do that and overcome the dreadful things they've gone through, and overcome in a way that's not hateful, is just fantastic. And it's sort of like when you exonerate someone off death row, to be able to take the person's life and give it back to them is a wonderful thing, the like of which I don't think many people get to experience. And I get to experience that a lot. And I view that as just wonderful, wonderful. I recommend it to anyone. Chuck your day job in. Come on, come and do a little human rights.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm sure that we'll come back to some of this stuff at another time. But I just want to finish off with something that particularly interests me in terms of, I think brings everything together a little bit, is what you give and what you've explained and expressed. You've given a lot of yourself, but you're also realizing that what you've given is nothing to what they are giving or being forced to give. But one of the things you mentioned to me in the conversation off screen last time we spoke was about the process that when you go to Guantanamo, and you have to, at this point, obviously because of COVID, you have to spend 2 weeks in isolation. So that again is having a big impact on you. And obviously you made the quip about the gin, but obviously you're away from your partner. I mean, do you have children, Clyde?
I have a 12-year-old who's playing Minecraft next door, if you can hear it. It's a very important game.
Yeah, we've got a 12-year-old who also plays Minecraft. Thank you. What's it like for you, though, leaving your partner and your 12-year-old?
Well, I've done that forever, so I'm not bothered by that. And I'm sure that's not really, I'm sure they enjoy a little bit of a breather. But the problem, I love going to Guantanamo because it is the time that you actually get to be with the human beings that we're trying to help. And so to me, that's by far the best part of the job. The problem is how it's evolved over the years. It's not just the quarantine. When I first went there in 2004, we were allowed to work from 8 a.m. till 5:30, 7 days a week. I could spend with my clients. And, you know, honestly, I don't go to Gitmo for a holiday. I go there to help the clients. And now their rules are so stupid that you can't see them but from 9:30 till like noon, and then 2 till 4:30, 5 days a week. So you end up working banker's hours and you're stuck there forever. And now when you go, you're meant to be locked up in one room for 2 weeks. And that's even when you get there, you've got to go down there on a military flight. And believe you me, the military flights are the least efficient in the world. Half the time, it seems a general wants to play golf and cancels the whole flight or whatever. But the bottom line is they cancel flights about every 3 times I go there, and then you're stuck not even being able getting there. And now you're stuck in this room for 2 weeks. Yes, I made the quip about the only way to survive is they have agreed to deliver gin and tonic to me. Thank God. But you really can't go outside, not at all, for 2 weeks from one little room. And that means to go just to visit for a week to the prisoners for a short week it takes over a month. And that's just such a waste of time. And it's such a disincentive, which is a great tragedy. I'm glad to say that they're beginning to lift the quarantine. And I think when I go in August, I won't have to be quarantined because I've had my vaccinations. But still, most people have to, which is a nightmare.
And to finish off this particular episode, this particular discussion, Clive, can I just ask, who pays for all of this? Who pays for the travel, that your expertise? Where's it coming from?
Well, it's all charitable, and I've just actually set up a new non-profit. Yeah, no one in Guantanamo has money, obviously. When I first went around the world to try to help people out, I would travel to different countries because, well, I remember going to Yemen, for example. The per capita income in Yemen was $300 a year, right? And if you're having to hire a New York lawyer, they charge over $1,000 an hour. So you've got 20 minutes of a New York lawyer's time if you don't eat all year. And so when these folk in Yemen, where there are a couple of hundred prisoners from Yemen, when they want to help their loved one, what are they meant to do? There's nothing they can do. So I went down there and just did a press conference and invited people in and said, look, I'll get you lawyers for free and I'll do it for free. And the great thing about that is the anger and hatred against America dissipated immediately the moment I said, look, I'm really sorry, what we've done is wrong, and we're going to try and set it right. But it's got to be for free because no one has any money. So I did get one attorney's fee once in my entire career, which was 2 6-packs of beer from my friend Ruth, because I got her off some speeding traffic tickets. But that's my only attorney's fee ever. So we have to do it by charity. And I'm just setting up a new one called the 3D Centre here in Dorset. And look, I'm never going to say no if someone wants to help fund it. There we go. We'll take half of your salary today and the other half at the end of the year. And you just got to go on a dart the rest of the time.
And do you have people around you who are obviously helping you to raise as much money as you can? And what sort of places are you appealing to?
No, there's no right now. I mean, I set up Reprieve years ago, but I left Reprieve because the founder should just leave after a bit, right? So Reprieve is now a well-functioning organization with fundraisers and everything. But right now, the new entity I'm doing is just me. But I plan to try to hire someone in the next week or so, and then we'll start doing what I've always done, which is raise funds to do this sort of thing. And, it's the nature of the beast, but actually, I'd much rather that than ever have to ask a prisoner's family for money, because that's just awful.
Right. Thank you very much, Clive. Thank you very much.
Cool.
I'm almost left at the point where I don't know what to say. I mean, because...
Well, I just want to say that the picture behind you, you're on the outside of the prison at the moment. I think, knowing you as I know you, I think we should get you across the other side of the fence and in one of the cells. But you should just celebrate the fact that you're on the outside.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's probably, in terms of empathy and understanding, we could probably sit here for days and discuss your experiences, but until people have actually got at least partial experience of what you've seen and what your clients have experienced, it's just a tip of the iceberg, isn't it? But thank you so much, Clive. Thank you, and hopefully again we can come back together and we can talk about some other. I want to talk about, for example, your experiences on death row. I mean, I'm sure that the listeners will be absolutely enthralled in terms of making sense of the reality that often is a pastiche that's put together by corporate media, which bears little relation. Is there, in terms of the very sort of our final thing, is there somewhere that people can contact you if they want to help and support you and give money to charity?
Sure. I mean, look, my email is just Clive at the 3DC number 3dc.org.uk, and anyone's welcome to have my email and contact me anytime about whatever you like.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Speak again soon, Clive. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Well, that was immense. Just sitting there, I'm almost in awe of Clive, to be fair. I sit there and I listen to, well, I am in awe of him. I sit there and listen to him because I've read his books, and obviously I've followed him since his documentary 14 Days in May, at the end of the 1980s. He's just a truly inspirational figure for myself. And just to just go through one of the things that I identified most, I think, was just to find out how he coped. How do you experience what he's experienced over the years, and what his coping mechanisms are? And I think it was really, really candid. It was great to hear him explain his ways of unwinding and coming away from situations, and drawing positives from the experiences. Because for some people, they might look at what he's done and what's going on in Guantanamo and other secret prisons, and they might think, well, this is so bleak. But actually, to be able to extract positivity in order to justify, if you like, in some ways, putting so much energy and effort into helping and supporting people, for me, that was remarkable.
Yeah, and just absolutely extraordinary to hear some of the truths about what happens in Guantanamo, particularly torture and killings. And obviously the vast majority of people that I think 780 odd people, I think he mentioned, that have been taken to Guantanamo, the vast majority have now been released and clearly were nothing to do with any kind of terrorist act or anything. So really pretty shocking to hear and hear the actual truth of it. But yeah, what an inspirational guy in terms of the work he carries out. Fantastic.
Yeah, and hopefully, well, I know, that hopefully in 2 or 3 weeks' time he's going to come on the show again and talk about something else, and this will be a recurring feature because he has so much stuff we want to hear, and hopefully the viewers want to hear too.
Yeah.
Okay, the last thing we're looking at today is around the whole topic, now that the economy is opening up, is about shop local. Let's avoid, if we can, going on the internet and buying too much, and also let's avoid going to the big corporate outlets, i.e. supermarkets, etc. And let's find a way of, if we're going to be buying stuff, putting the money into local shops, local entertainment, local venues. And I know you've been having, doing a bit of research yourself, Tom, in terms of around Dorset, of some of the places that local people can access and make the most of. And we have a number of articles for the readers of Dorset Eye. There's a number of articles on there that people can access, obviously, at any point.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, we're all being well, continuing to come out, or slowly out of pandemic restrictions, shops back open, and some entertainment venues now back open. And so we really wanted to just give people the message to shop local and enjoy local. So as you say, shop local wherever possible. What we mean by that, as you mentioned, is preferably not with the big multinational corporations, who will do fine anyway. They're not, most of them are not in any danger of going under. Whereas local independent businesses have obviously struggled massively, and those that have survived need our support. And of course, shopping local and using independent stores is better for the environment. There's less transportation of goods on a global scale. So yeah, in terms of our food, in terms of shopping for clothes, etc., let's go to those independent stores wherever we can, butchers and bakers and candlestick makers. Let's go to the little independent shops that sell clothing, etc. Even things like takeaways, rather than go to the big chains, let's go to our local takeaway stores wherever possible. And in terms of enjoying local, we just wanted to give a push for all the local arts venues that are out there that have likewise been desperately struggling. Cinemas, theatres, arts venues across the county really struggled to survive the last year, and the people that work in them. running them, and entertainers, actors, comedians, singers, bands, etc. They've all been struggling with no income. So let's support those artists. Let's support those venues as much as we can, and that includes, you know, that I should also mention pubs. You know, if you like going to the pub, let's try and go to the local sort of non-chain pubs wherever possible, rather than the big, you know, the big Weatherspoons chain pubs. Let's
No,
go to the local ones.
it's not Weatherspoons anymore, Tom. I don't know if you've heard, they've changed their name.
What is it now, Jace?
Neverspoons.
Neverspoons. There is an app, isn't there, that encourages people to go to sort of independent pubs rather than to Weatherspoons or Neverspoons. So yeah, obviously encourage people to support local independent businesses of all sorts, including pubs. And then in terms of arts and entertainment, you know, we've got an abundance in Dorset of museums, theatres, cinemas, concert venues, and, you know, especially throughout this summer, all being well, you know, we'll be able to return to going to see plays, going to comedy events, concerts, music concerts, festivals. There are arts festivals, there's food festivals, including our local seafood festival here in Weymouth. There are pride events, Bournemouth Pride and the New Forest are planning their first pride event. There's the county show in late August. There's Dorset Steam Fair in early September. So lots and lots of events and, you know, arts and entertainment things to go along and enjoy and to support. And in terms of venues, this isn't a sort of full list, because locally all around the county there are lots and lots of different arts venues. But I just jotted down a bit of a list of the kinds of places that we should think of going to support. We don't have to go to London to see shows in the West End or what have you. There's so much terrific things going on locally. So you can go to venues like, you know, in Bournemouth there's the Pavilion, the O2 Academy. There's Poole Lighthouse, obviously in Poole. Weymouth, we've got the Pavilion. In Portland, there's Royal Manor Theatre. There's Bridport Arts Centre and the Electric Palace. The Tivoli Theatre in Wimborne. Dorchester Arts and the Corn Exchange in Dorchester. the Molam Theatre in Swanage. The Marine Theatre in Lyme Regis. Shaftesbury Arts Centre. And just outside of Dorset in Yeovil in Somerset, we've of course got the Octagon Theatre and Westlands Entertainment Venue. So all across, and lots of others that I've not even mentioned there, but across the county, you know, we're so lucky to have so many different arts and entertainment venues, and you know, the smaller independent cinemas that are dotted around the place. So we just want to encourage people when they're now that we're opening things up and able to go and enjoy those things again, let's try and all choose to support our local and independent venues as much as we can.
Well said, absolutely well said. And of course, the different museums, a lot of the local museums had things in place pre-COVID, which they then had to cancel, and some of them are hoping to bring back those themes, whatever they might be, you know, not from now on, post-COVID, or hopefully post-COVID, but certainly across the summer. So yeah, there's some wonderful places right on our doorstep. We went to see, we talk about the Swanage, there's the open amphitheatre on the hill overlooking Swanage. We went to see Shakespeare, what play it was now, but we went to see it about when Millie was small, our youngest was small. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. It was brilliant. They're so talented, young people, and it's just, you know, why, like you say, why travel hundreds of miles to see talented people who live right on our doorstep? Yeah. And also putting one call out as well for Dorset Arts Week. I know it's coming to the end of Dorset Arts Week, but look into Dorset Arts on the internet and just see what venues there are, and what things are going on, and while the sun's out, making the most of it.
Absolutely. Go out and enjoy yourself, folks.
Go out and enjoy yourself. Yeah.
Savour everything we have to offer in Dorset, and support our local businesses as well.
Definitely, definitely. Well, another episode has ended, Tom.
It has, and it's amazing, fabulous guests that we had this week talking about some really interesting and important topics, from local democracy to to international human rights issues, and of course to the huge issue of the climate emergency. So yeah, really great to have those terrific guests on, Jace.
Brilliant. Well, have a great week, and for our viewers, look out for the lovely, as we're going to call it, or the funny, or whatever it is that we attach at the end, just to bring them all light-hearted end to the episode. And you have a great week, Tom, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you, mate. Look after yourself. Cheers, everyone. See you next week.
Bye.
Wow, so cool having